Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today I find out how you grew as a photographer this year. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to helping you grow your photography skills. Raymond interviews the world's top photographers in their field to ask questions that will get you taking better photos today. Now, with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back to this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today is a very special interview because it features you, the listeners. This whole year, at the end of every episode, I wrap up with a reminder to focus on yourself. You know, today it is so easy to listen to everyone else. YouTube videos on how to do this, blogs on how to do that, Facebook posts on, why everyone is wrong. We rarely take the time to listen to what we want to do. What are we compelled to explore as individuals, as artists? So that's why I remind you to focus on yourself at the end of every episode, to follow the path that you want to follow, just to see where it leads. So today, I chat with 3 members of the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group to see how they focused on themselves in 2019 and how they grew their photography. So let's listen in. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and start right now. Kimberly,
Okay.
Why don't you tell us who you are and how long you have been shooting?
Okay, so my name is Kim, and I am a homeschooling mom of 4, and I started shooting seriously last fall, probably around September, so about a little bit over a year ago. The reason I started shooting is because I had my 4th baby, and I was bored, and I wanted to use my camera that I had been given several years ago in order to keep track of what's going on in our lives. So I learned.
So why was it that you had this camera? You had it, you just didn't use it for all these years. And then after your 4th child, you thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and pick this up. What was it that made you think now is the time?
I think it was just kind of the perfect storm. Prior to him, I had my camera, but we were always moving around, or we were busy with other stuff. We had just moved to Wisconsin a couple years ago, and that's when I originally got my camera. But then we were getting settled and finding our people, our homeschool group, our church, and everything like that. And so it just took some time for us to get settled. And then finally, once we had the baby, it was like, okay, we're here. Like, we actually live here now. So I guess I better start keeping track of that. So
it just felt like life had finally slowed down enough to be able to focus on something else.
Yeah, to be able to pick something up. And my mind needs something to do all the time. So why not do photography?
So photography it was. So you started off photographing the kids. What now do you primarily shoot?
When it's just for fun, I am primarily shooting things outdoors, flowers, leaves, generally just flowers and leaves in the garden. I really enjoy a lot of macro, but I also enjoy setting just different challenges for myself. I am just now learning off-camera flash, still working on that. And so when I get free time to shoot with my kids, I am just setting up different things with them with off-camera flash, some studio stuff in our basement, and going outside and making little fairylands with my daughter and things like that. But then I have been doing a lot of paid stuff in the last few months. So I've been doing a lot of newborns and a lot of families. So that's what I'm doing.
So when you go outside and you bring the kids outside and you're like, you know what, I want to photograph some flowers and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Do you go out with the intention of shooting, or do you go out and just bring your camera and then whatever you see, then you photograph it?
It depends. Frequently I'll go out just with the intention of taking pictures, but I do also take my camera every time we go on a walk, and we go every single day. And so when I do go out with the intention of shooting things, I don't have an exact specific idea. I'm going to get that maple tree today, but I will say, okay, I want to find an interesting way of looking at something today. And so I'll find something that seems a little bit intriguing, like I found some berries, or I found this branch or whatever. And then I'll, take 20 minutes or so and study it and look at it from different angles and figure out how I can make it look the most interesting to me. And that's kind of how it works.
Would you say that you were doing that at the beginning of 2019?
No.
So then tell me where you were at in the beginning of 2019.
In the beginning of 2019, when I first started listening to the podcast, I remember that this is totally not the question you asked, but I'm going to answer it this way. So I remember I was nursing my baby still, and so I was rocking him in the middle of the night, trying to keep myself awake, as you do, with the toothpicks in the eyelids, And in order to help me stay awake, I would listen to the podcast. So at like 2 a.m., you were keeping me awake.
That's weird, because usually my voice puts myself to sleep. I can't imagine that it doesn't put everybody else to sleep.
It was an interesting topic.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah. It wasn't me. It was the topic. Yeah,
that's right. And so it wasn't until I started thinking about photography more technically and just thinking about finding ways of seeing things differently. Like a lot of the different guests that you had on were talking about how they would try to be creative in their way of presenting things or finding an interesting way of showing things. And so that's what made me really start thinking about that. And I remember the first time I really started doing that was in like February. We had this crazy polar vortex ice storm madness. And so I went outside and like everything was just covered in ice. And I have all these pictures of like perfectly round little berries that are just
encapsulated in ice.
It's really cool. So that was the first time that I was really like, oh, this is pretty impressive. Like really, really cool. So that was like in February, but in January before that, I was just hoping that I would take a picture every day. I started a 365 project. I started posting stuff on a blog that I created, and then I abandoned that to do. But it got me through, February, I think. But that was my goal, was just to take pictures every day, and hopefully they would improve. And I think they have, and I still do take pictures every single day, but just not with that intentionality of like, I have to take a picture today. It's become part of what I'm doing.
Yeah. So were you, before February, before this polar vortex came, were you still shooting in auto? Had you explored other camera modes by that time?
No, I have only ever shot in manual.
Oh, really?
Because I'm a super nerd. And when I first ordered my camera, I was waiting for it to arrive because we didn't have Prime. And so it was like a week,
Oh, the agony. Oh my God.
Yeah. And so while I was waiting, I had, just researched a lot of different stuff, and everything that I read was like, shoot a manual. So I started really researching that and figuring out what that meant. And so by the time I got my camera, I kind of had an understanding of the exposure triangle, all of that jazz. So that was never really an issue for me. Like I understood the concepts in my head, but like putting it together kind of took a while. But yeah, I think I've only ever shot in manual because of that.
Okay, so even though you had started shooting manual right away, say January, again, we'll go back there. Sure. On a scale from 1 to 10, what would you rate your knowledge of photography?
I would say, considering that right now I would put myself at like a 5. In January, I'd be like a 2.
Okay, gotcha. Perfect. Okay, so then 2019 happens. You've been listening to the podcast. And at the end of every episode, I remind you to focus on yourself. Mm-hmm. When you hear that, what does that mean to you?
I struggle with it a bit, just because I don't have time for that. And so focusing on myself this year has meant like sitting down and actually putting something into Lightroom and figuring out what all the different things mean, and staying up past midnight pretty much every night of my life this year just to watch one more YouTube video or like edit 4 or 5 more photos just to see what I can do with them. And just actually having that practice and having done a lot of that, not necessarily research, but just learning, I think I've absorbed quite a bit. I feel that I'm very proficient within Lightroom now, and so I'm trying to explore a little bit more into Photoshop now. So it has really been just a matter of, I think the thing that I've done with that, the focus on yourself thing, is that I haven't gone and tried to learn everything there is to learn so that then I can do it in the future. I've waited until I needed something, and then I've learned how to do that. And then so that I've mastered it like right away, and it's been meaningful to me. So for example, I haven't gone and learned everything in Photoshop because I didn't need it. But then I had a family where the mom really, really wanted me to face swap her head because she didn't like the way her hair looked in one of the photos. And so I was like, oh, I guess I better learn to do that. So I did, and now I'm very good at it. So it's that kind of stuff where it's been just, I've had to be very intentional about how I've learned photography, and that's kind of what it's meant.
Is that pretty normal for you? Is that kind of the traditional path in which you learn, or would you say normally you are all over the place trying to absorb everything all at once?
I'm pretty methodical about things.
Okay. So then how would you say that the podcast changed your photography in the sense of focusing on yourself?
So with the podcast, it has been just kind of introducing me to a lot of different ways in how people approach photography. So there are the people who start photography with the intention of, I'm going to start a business. And then there are people who start photography because they like doing it. They enjoy the art. They enjoy that. I haven't heard very many people who embrace photography for the challenge of learning something new, which is kind of where I'm coming from for the most part. And then I also knew that I did want to do a business with it eventually, because why learn something new if you can't use it? And so just kind of seeing it from a lot of different perspectives has been the most challenging thing. And so the one part about the podcast that has really pushed me, and not in a bad way, but like given me motivation, was Nick Church, when you interviewed him, because he went from like 0 to 1,000
full time. Yeah.
And so that was really inspiring to me. And he's been part of the photography group, the podcast group on Facebook, and he's been a very active part there. And he's been very, very supportive and encouraging all of the time, which is really cool to see. And so shout out to Nick Church. But no, it's just seeing people's journeys and seeing how, even though it's very, very different from my perspective, sometimes it's for everybody, really. So.
I know. Isn't that the craziest thing, though? Isn't that I too would say that that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned by hosting this podcast, which is just simply how many different ways there are to do, to kind of get to the same goal.
Right.
10 different people can call themselves professional photographers, and all of them could be doing things completely differently, and yet they all work. And I love that you were able to kind of pick that up and still decide, like, well, is this for me? Is that the right decision for me? Or should I just completely ignore this piece of information? Because that's got to be the hardest part, right? When you know that somebody used that piece of information, used it to become successful, and then you knowingly like ignore it, you're like, I'm not going to go that way.
That's not for me.
Yeah, exactly. So in 2019, what would you say is the number one thing that you did that contributed to your growth in photography this year?
Just practicing a lot, I think. I didn't go a day without taking a picture. I didn't go a day without editing a picture. I didn't go a day without thinking about photography and thinking about how I might change what I did in the past, or coming up with an idea of something that I wanted to try or something like that. So I think that was just what pushed me along, was a lot of internal motivation, but then also knowing, like with the podcast group on Facebook, that there was always going to be a lot of support and a lot of like hand holding. Like, okay, I tried this. What do you guys think? And it's been great to have people chiming in and saying, well, try this again and try this differently, or like, you did great here, whatever. It's been great to have a lot of feedback there. So,
has there ever been a time where maybe you took a photo, like in the early days when you first started picking up your camera, and it just wasn't working. But now, what am I trying to say here? Like you took a photo and you're like, I remember that I was having a hard time with this previously. Had that ever happened to you?
Yes. So in March, I believe, I took my eldest daughter outside, and I was just focusing on just changing aperture and seeing how that would affect things. And I could not get my camera to focus no matter what I was doing that day. I don't know what was wrong with me that day. Actually, I struggled a lot with focus for several months at the beginning of learning. And I don't know why. Focus was so hard for me. I got the exposure triangle, but I couldn't focus. So when I took her out and we were just doing a lot of stuff, like it was a really windy day and it was sunny and pretty, and I had like the backlight coming in on, on her hair, and it was going to be so pretty, and then it ended up being not in focus and crazy, and I just couldn't figure out what was going on. But now if I took her out and tried to do the exact same thing, it would be like, okay, done,
Piece of cake. Yeah.
Fairly simple. So
that's awesome. That's got to be a good feeling. I remember when you were posting, you had so many questions about focus, and I remember thinking there has to be something wrong with their camera. Like nobody has this many problems with focus.
Just me. I don't know what was wrong with me. I really don't know.
That's hilarious. But today it's fixed. Today you don't have that same problem. So exactly. Who cares? Who cares?
Although I think you did interview somebody recently who also said that she struggled with focus at the beginning, and I was like, yes, I'm not. So that made me feel better.
It's always good to know that somebody else went through the same struggles.
Yep.
So you said it earlier. You said that now probably if you were to re-rate yourself, you would say on a scale from 1 to 10, you're feeling like a 5, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So then what would you say, having made that growth, what's one piece of advice that you would give to everyone listening who does want to grow their skills and kind of get that same growth as you've experienced?
I would say practice, obviously. Go outside, or not even outside. Go take some pictures of something that's interesting to you. Don't take pictures of things that aren't interesting, because then it's really boring. But also don't expect everybody to be excited about the same things that you're excited about, which is sad, because I try really hard to make my family feel excited about things, but they don't. And it's, come on, guys, it's fun. They don't care. But also, not even necessarily being in photography groups to ask for criticism all the time or to participate in the group, but just kind of follow along and see what people are saying and take those notes. I say the same thing to my daughter in dance class. Like, when your teacher gives corrections to the other girls, take those corrections for yourself and try to apply those. And then also just focus on one thing at a time. So it took me a while to get focused down. So once I got focused down, then I could start thinking about other stuff and other parts of photography that are, pieces of the puzzle. So it's starting to come together, but there's still a lot that's missing for me.
Mm-hmm. You're always going to feel that way. I feel that way sometimes.
Yeah.
I go to take a photo and it doesn't work, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, why is this not working? This should be working. And then like you said, though, just practice and make it work. So if somebody is just now starting to shoot manual, like for the first time ever, where would you suggest that they start? Like, where's the absolute beginning that they should start? Well, this question shouldn't be this long, but now I'm trying to finish it in my head. Where should they start to start feeling proficient using their camera?
I sat down at my dining room table with my mug and a rock.
A rock? What?
It was what I had.
Okay.
Remember, things that are interesting to you. It wasn't an interesting rock, but I do like my mug.
Oh, you were photographing these things. Oh, okay, I gotcha.
I wasn't like throwing things.
Yeah, I was wondering where this was going. Okay, I got it.
Stack no. So I just sat down and I was playing around with everything. So I would say, okay, I'm going to keep ISO the same, and I'm going to keep my shutter speed the same. Okay, let's play with aperture. What can I do with that? And then I would figure that out and say, oh, I like the look of how this is here. So then I would say, okay, let's keep our aperture at, f5.6. And then I would say, okay, well, what does the shutter speed do? And I would just look and change it. And I never took any of those and put them into Lightroom so I could like analyze them or anything like that. It was just straight on the back of the camera at that point. So that's what I would do. Like it sounds not super fun, but
No, just keep it as easy as possible.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's worth it. And that's the
perfect.
thing is don't change all the variables. Like if you're going for one look over here, like don't be going over there and like, just but I'm super methodical lady, so
That totally makes sense. As somebody who was all over the place and tried to learn by doing everything at once, it took me a long time to figure it out, and I wish that I would have taken your advice for sure, for sure. Well, Kim, is there anything that that's all the questions that I have for you? Is there anything that you want to share with the listeners right now that I haven't asked you? And if not, why don't you share where we can find you online?
I don't really have anything else to share, I don't think.
Well, then where can we find you online?
Well, I just have a Facebook page, and my Facebook page is We Irish Photography. 3 words. We like small.
All right, so we'll just hop on into this. I'm just going to ask you, why don't you tell me right now who you are and how long you've been shooting?
Okay, so my name's Saul Larry, and I've been shooting for a long time. I started with my iPhone, I pretty much smartphone photography, but then I finally got my first DSLR maybe 3 years ago. But of course, I didn't completely understand what you could do with a DSLR, and people that I knew that I used to shoot with would tell me, "Hey, you should learn how to shoot manual." But I'm thinking, "Oh, I got this auto thing in lock, so I'll just use that." So I was shooting in auto for a very long time. So to be honest, until I saw your podcast, and one of your podcasts I heard about explaining the difference between shooting in auto and manual, I was shooting auto for very long.
So, do you think that that was ever like while you were shooting auto, before everybody was like, "Hey, man, maybe you should try a manual," and you thought, "I got this thing, like it's working." Like, what was it that was working for you? And was there anything that you felt that you were still being held back by?
So I think for the most part, the iPhone was the main thing that had me start shooting. And then when I tried to do the manual thing, I looked at it and it just looked really intimidating. So I was just like, I'm just gonna, I mean, it's just like an iPhone. It has an auto, I'm gonna use this. So, and I think that's what held me back, starting with a smartphone versus starting with a DSLR. Because I'm pretty sure if I had a DSLR first, I would have been like, well, what is this manual thing? And actually learned it because I just thought, hey, the photos are coming out great. Why move from that? So I
That makes
think that
sense.
was the biggest thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If it's not broke, don't fix it. That's what they
Yes,
say, right? Yeah.
that's what it is. Until I learned the hard
Yeah.
way.
Well, it's
And
really interesting with art because I feel like growing up, we've always been taught that, right? If it's not broke, don't fix it.
yep,
And that's kind of like that adult to a kid mentality, you know. But because I know personally from having kids that they just want to destroy everything all the time, regardless of whether or not it's working. And some of the most interesting things that I've ever seen comes from when I've told them, like, "Hey, like don't take that apart," and then they take it apart anyway. Like that's where some of their most creative moments come from. And I
yep,
think that it's that just when you get into a creative mindset, sometimes you don't know what it is that you're going to see, but when you do see it, something clicks. And that's what's hard, like for me as an educator, to kind of push across, you know, to show people, because I can't be the person to show you that one little thing that's really gonna like make everything click. And the only way to do that is just to go out there and practice and learn for yourself, which is exactly what happened to you.
yep,
So I'm always telling people, get out, go shoot. You know,
yeah.
this is what you got to do. This is what you got to do to learn. So let's go back even further. What was it that got you interested in photography in the first place, just by using your cell phone?
So I mean, I like capturing moments, and also I like to see people's impression on their face when they see the photo. Oh, that's cool. So I would always take the picture and edit it up, make it look all good, and then people are like, we have the same smartphones. How are you able to get that photo out of that?
Uh,
It's the same thing. So show me how to do that, and I would kind of show them like, okay, you got it. I'm going to let you do all the photos from here on. So that was kind of the thing that got me into it, getting people to look at my photos and be like, oh, that's amazing. And I like being creative because I used to do, I still do YouTube, but not as big as I used to. I do YouTube, so I love creating. So I make videos. So then I would take photos and add those to my videos, and vice versa. Also used to do music back in the day too. I used to make beats and record music also. So it's just kind of something in my blood. But photography right now has got me locked down. Like I'm definitely something I'm going to roll with and keep doing.
yeah, it's like a natural progression. I
Yeah.
love that. So what is it now that you primarily focus on shooting?
I like shooting people. I love the I don't know, something about people brings a lot of emotion. And then after I take the photo and I edit it, or just the final product of when I deliver it to people, I almost like I put like a little video together, like a little slideshow, and I'm like, man, I did a good job here. So just that doing that delivery, it's amazing. I get the perfect music. I like to bring tears. So when they see the photos, they're like, oh wow, this is amazing. And I love that feeling. And also, I mean, you make some money on the side. You know, I'm in the military. We make some money, but we don't make a lot. So that's awesome to have that extra money coming in, $200, $300 extra a month, and as it goes up more and more.
Yeah, I can't wait for you to go back and watch us on YouTube, because your face right there when you were talking about how excited you get when you see other people's reactions to how they look in your photos was priceless. I could really tell right there in that moment that you're really passionate about this, that you're really excited.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Yeah. So in the beginning of 2019, where were you at in your photography?
So February 17th, I wrote it down here so I can remember this.
Yes.
I shot some maternity photos. Now here I am shooting in auto. Could you imagine shooting maternity photos maternity photos in auto? And I'm trying to get this whole little, pretty much the silhouette look. You know,
never gonna happen in auto.
Horrible. So I'm here. I got the sheet up and everything set up to take these photos, and I'm just like, I'm gonna make this work, because I didn't understand manual. So I'm just trying to make this work. And at the end of the photo shoot, I was like, ouch, these photos didn't come out the way I wanted them to. And I was just trying to figure out, how did they do that? Like, how do they get those shots? And everybody just kept speaking manual. So at the very beginning, it was really rough shooting professionally. Well, not even professional, that was free. It was a free shoot, but just shooting and not getting the product that you want, not getting the artistic look that you wanted, because everything is in auto. So that beginning was really rough.
Oh, man.
Really, really rough.
That's my favorite thing about shooting manual, is just how easily you can create silhouettes.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that, you know, you never really think about, but somehow there would always be that one moment. I remember in high school, I had this little, it was a Gateway. You remember like Gateway computers?
Yes.
Like they had the cow box. They came out with a digital camera. And I don't remember why we had this camera, but it was my first digital camera, and it was like this 5 megapixel, and this thing was garbage. Like you would press the shutter button and there would be a 4-second delay before it would take a photo. So you would have to like pre-anticipate by like 4 seconds whenever something was going to happen, and then hope that you would get that moment. So it's just always terrible. But I figured out that if you were to take a photo, it would lock that exposure, and then you could still move the camera. You still had 4 seconds to move the camera wherever you wanted. So I would point the camera at something bright, go to take a photo, and then I would move it into like some sort of composition where there was a silhouette happening, and it would capture that. But since it had no manual controls, I was always like, gosh, I wish I could replicate this, you know, whenever I wanted to. And now you can. So that's always a great feeling. Always a great feeling. So quick question, on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate your knowledge of photography back then, February 17th, 2019?
So knowing what I know now, a 1.
A 1.
Yeah. Because I mean, like I had the ideal of taking good photos. Like I know what I wanted to see. But once I learned about composition and I learned about exposure, the exposure triangle, and all those different things, I'm going to give that a 1. Because I could get a good photo on a smartphone because it does all the work for you. But on a real camera, a Canon that I use, it's not going to do the same effect as a smartphone can with the HDR and all that cool stuff. So I would say a 1.
A 1, jeez.
Yeah.
I love how you were still having people like in front of the camera. Like you were still like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make this happen. People are going to come, and we're going to get this working. So then what was it in 2019 that happened, right? Because you've been listening to the podcast, and at the end of every episode, I remind listeners like you to focus on yourself. What did that mean for you?
It was actually just one podcast I heard, but ultimately it was, I'm military, right? I was on the ship before. I was on the ship for the past 5 years. So I didn't really have time to really focus on stuff. We would go out on deployments and hit different ports, but I didn't really have internet to look things up. So when I got finally back in January, I moved to Virginia, and I was like, I'm going to do this for real. I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to do what I can to make this a real thing. And so then I heard your podcast, and I'm like, a podcast about photography. How is this going to work out? You know, like, because, you know, you want visual, right?
Of course.
And I got to be honest, one of your podcasts, it was about why you should shoot in manual. And I can't remember which one it was. I tried to find it because I want other people, like I was going to share it with other people. And you mentioned, like, I mean, I can't remember exact words, but pretty much you bought this camera to be creative and create things. And that was the biggest defining moment. And then you were like, hey, take care of yourself while doing it. And I was like, man, this is the ultimate moment for me to do that. And so I said, I'm going to learn manual. And so I took your one course, the short course you did. What course was that? Not Auto to Amazing.
It's changed. It's probably the 2-day photography boot camp.
I think so. That one. I did that one, and I was good. I was rolling.
Yeah.
I was rolling.
So what was it that you would attribute to being the biggest factor of your success? Like, what was it that you learned that really pushed you forward?
I want to say being able to control the exposure. I think being able to do aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, understanding those three things, I want to say was the biggest thing, because I'll give you an example. Back in May, I shot my wife's wife had a family, and we drove to Florida. I drove all the way to Florida. It's my birthday, by the way. On my birthday, I had a photo shoot on my birthday, and I'm like, cool, I'll do it. I don't care. I want to get this experience, right? I was shooting in auto. So guess what they did? So we had planned to be there about 4:30, 5 o'clock. So guess what time they showed up?
What time?
7 o'clock.
No.
So guess what I needed? I needed to be able to shoot a manual, because now I know, because I need to be able to slow down my shutter, you know what I'm saying? Close, I'll make my aperture bigger, those types of things to get better lighting. So I shot that in auto. Horrible experience, horrible. So it was, that's why I say the exposure thing was huge, because as the light's dropping, no matter what time of day, and then I also did your flash course, but just honestly, your course teaching shutter speed, aperture, and ISO was the final factor changing the way I did photography, period.
So you already had known from the beginning that, now maybe you were a little slow at getting there, but you already knew that manual was going to be the key to unlock getting those creative shots that you wanted.
No, I did not. But again, I heard that podcast, and I was like, man, maybe this is, because it was kind of like a hidden gem in a sense, because I didn't know. But once I saw the video, and I said, oh wow, that could help in this situation, that situation. Oh my God, what have I been doing for the past however long? Like, I would have been so much further along, because I had a DSLR for about, I want to say 2 or 3 years now. Where would I be now if I had been shooting in manual this entire time with my business, with everything? So honestly, that podcast was kind of like I didn't know that was there. Like this gold mine was sitting in this corner this entire time on my camera, but I didn't know until that podcast I heard of yours, and it opened my eyes to, I need to learn this.
Yeah, you had it in your back the whole time. That gold mine was right there.
Yeah.
It's like that phrase, my favorite phrase, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. Yeah. That's my favorite. So even though, you had that DSLR the whole time, you can always get started. So now, end of 2019, scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate your knowledge of photography?
I would say 7 to 8 because of there's still situations like right now. I have a studio shoot this coming December, and I've never shot in a studio before. So I'm on the Facebook page, or your page, and asking questions on how can I figure this out, because one guy just helped me out just recently with telling me what kind of, I can use paper instead of the muslin materials to use. So I think there's still things I still need to learn, like composition and things like that. But ultimately 7 or 8, and I don't know if I'm being modest, I don't know, but I think I understand I understand photography as a whole as far as exposure goes, and I understand it composition wise, and I'm still learning certain things here and there, but for the most part, I think I'm a 7 or 8, but I want to say 10, but I mean, there's still things I'm like, oh wow, I didn't know how to shoot the studio. Oh wow, I didn't know how to do this. Even though I did do a flash course inside of a gym. I mean, I did I actually taught a course here locally in my area. Only 2 people showed up. I invited 10, but 2 people showed up. But
you changed 2 people's life.
Yeah, and they learned quick, and they were like, oh wow, you did an amazing job. And I literally, everything you taught me was able to just come back to me and be able to teach it. And I actually learned more myself by teaching that course, actually.
Yeah, that's a great feeling. That is so awesome. Congratulations. Have you seen like any of their photos yet? Have you got any photos back and been like, wow, you guys are doing it?
So I taught the course, and I don't know if you've been, well, I know you went on vacation. I've actually had to get foot surgery. So the past almost 30 days, I haven't been able to walk. So I haven't been able to talk to them or like kind of converse with them, because I normally see them at work or around. So I'm when I get back, I'm going to come see what the work they've been doing since I've taught them. actually.
Yeah, you're gonna have to update me. I'm super
Yeah.
excited to hear about the results. That is so cool. That is so cool.
Okay.
Well, then, my last question for you is, what would you say is the one piece of advice that you would give to anybody listening right now who wants to go from a 1 to an 8 in 2020?
So I'm assuming everybody knows how to shoot a manual. If you don't know how to shoot a manual, to go from 1 to 8 is to learn how to shoot a manual. Period. You learn how to shoot a manual, it's going to change your life. Because that definitely changed my whole photography game. I'm more confident in my shoots. I have more control of what I'm doing with the camera. It just ultimately helped me in every aspect because it opened up more doors, like using your flash in a flash course. I wouldn't have been able to do that course without learning first how to use exposure and things like that. So if you're trying to go from 1 to an 8, if you feel, I mean, some people may feel like they're the 1, but they might be at a 10.
Yeah.
They don't realize. But I think learning how to shoot a manual, if you don't know how to shoot a manual, is the biggest monster that I didn't even know was in the room at the entire time to learn how to do, to take care of.
What I love about photography is that you don't have to choose one thing or another, right? It's not that you have to either have a full-time job or like hustle and make it as a full-time photographer.
Yeah.
Photography offers you the flexibility to do both, to
Yeah.
have that. And as you said, have that extra few $100s a month coming in from photography. And that can help a lot.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. And my wife does food delivery, and she has her own business on Etsy. And single-handedly, I'm pulling in more money than she does. Don't tell her that. But I pull in more money than she does just doing photography.
Yeah.
And I'm not really charging. So that's when, like, I think that's the next huge big step for me, is to learn how to price my things to be able to keep my business rolling and make it bigger.
Of course. Oh, fantastic. I'm so excited for you. So excited for you.
Thank you so
I got to
much.
tell you personally, like from the beginning of the year, when you first joined, I remember you sent me this long email and I was like, wow, this guy, I can already tell, is really passionate about photography. Yeah. Really excited to get this thing going. But I got to be honest, I get a lot of those, right? I get a lot of those, but it was you who stood out. You continued, you made it in the group. You kept posting, you kept asking really good questions for criticism, trying to figure out what it was that would make a photo better. And I've just been really excited to see your growth this year. I'm super excited to watch where you're going here in the future as well. I know that the listeners are going to want to follow along with you and check out some of your work. So why don't you tell them where they can find you online?
All right, so, I appreciate this. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So on Facebook, if you look up Saul, Saul, Lowry, Lowery, photography, I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, same name, Saul Lowry Photography on Instagram. You can find me in those two places. I haven't built a website yet, unfortunately, but I'm trying to work on myself to get bigger.
Takes time. Yeah, that'll be your goal for 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. I'll take that challenge.
I will. I'll post links in the show notes as well to find you on Facebook and on Instagram as well.
Awesome.
But aside from that, man, thank you so much, and I'm seriously looking forward to seeing where you go here in 2020. I know that it's going to be good things.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, so it's recording now. We're officially going. So, Jim, why don't you go ahead and tell me? You don't have to tell me. Tell the listeners who you are and how long you've been shooting.
Okay, my name is Jim Sinicki. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've really been shooting seriously for probably about a year and a half now. I picked up a camera because I've seen a few of my friends who are, taking pictures, and I'm like, you know what? I can probably do that myself. I can learn how to do that. It's been a wild ride ever since.
So hold on. That's a big jump right there. From seeing somebody post a photo and think like, oh, I could do that, to deciding on your own that you're going to get a camera, that you're going to learn this thing, and that you're going to go through this journey. Now, what was it about either those initial photos or something that got you excited to do this?
Honestly, I don't even know. I saw the pictures. I was like, you know what? Those are pretty cool looking. I wonder if I can do that. So my wife for Christmas a couple of years ago bought me my first Canon, I believe it was the XS, and I just started learning how to shoot on that.
So after a year and a half, obviously there's a lot of time there. You could grow, you could, some people just dive in right away, like, you know what, I need to learn manual. Others throw it in auto and just try to get the best results that they can. Where were you on that spectrum when you first seriously started shooting?
I was at the very low end of I'm going to dive right in and see what happens. I honestly, I didn't even understand what an f-stop was. I had no clue what AV meant. I had no clue what TV meant. I just knew, hey, I can run these dials and get random pictures going on, which didn't work out too well. I think I've showed you some of my old pictures, and I was like, I'm pretty good back then. And I look back at it now, I'm like, I don't even know what I was even thinking at the time.
Man, that was totally me too. Totally me too. I think that's kind of
It's all of
everybody.
us, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. In the beginning, you don't really. Um, I don't think that. I think that when you first pick up a camera, you understand that it can take cool photos, but you don't understand exactly what it can do for you. You don't understand how powerful of a tool it can really be if you sit down and you learn it. I mean, because the thing is that like the difference between a bad photo and a good photo is big, right? For a lot of
Right.
people. But, and I say this about sushi too, the difference between bad sushi and good sushi is massive. But the difference, at least to me, between good sushi and great sushi isn't that much, I can't tell. If we were to go to a high-end sushi restaurant, I wouldn't be able to tell. And I
Oh,
think it's kind of the same for photography, right? Good photography and great photography. Like the point is that they're telling a story. It just maybe one has more context, one is more fluid, uh, uh, but they still have like the same basic elements. And I think that once, even if you're just shooting an auto and you're able to capture a few good photos, you think like this is fantastic. Like this is
yeah.
where I want to go.
I'm the best one ever.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And then you don't realize like, but I can do this consistently, and that's really when things start to take off, which is awesome.
Exactly.
So, what did you start off shooting, and what are you shooting now?
I started off shooting landscape and street, just like around my neighborhood. I'm lucky enough where I live in a part of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I'm 5 minutes away from the lake. I grew up basically on a lake. So my first day, I think we went out, and my wife and I shot our cameras probably where we got married, literally right on the lake. It was a cold day out, and I didn't know what I was doing, and took like one good picture on my own. And she's like, that's really, really good. We can keep on doing this. And I'm like, yeah, let's do this again. So now I'm kind of gearing more towards client work. I'm trying to build up for more portrait work. Kind of behind the curve right now in Wisconsin because it's winter and there's not a whole lot going on. But yeah, I think going forward, it's more client work now.
Specifically for portraits.
Yeah.
Any specific type of portrait?
Anybody who wants a picture, you come let me know.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So let's talk about kind of your progression this year, because the whole point of the podcast is obviously to help people learn photography and understand, but really, for me, it's to show that there's more than just one way of doing photography, right?
Right.
There's more than just one path that you can follow. What one person does not mean that it's going to work for everybody else, and that's why I end each episode by saying, focus on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of forge that own path for yourself. So when you hear that at the end of each podcast episode, what does focus on yourself mean to you?
To me, it's like you said, don't worry about what other people are doing. I think when we first start shooting, we want to be better than everybody else. We want to be able to do what other people are doing. And now it's just really taking what you're learning and picking up and taking off from there. You might be happy doing one thing, but can you do it better? I'm sure you can. Focus on yourself and make that part better, and then move on and try learning a new talent with photography.
Yeah. So so in the beginning of 2019, where were you with your photography?
Basically just learning the whole thing over again, just learning how to do it the right way. 2019 was a big year for me to learn how to get it right in camera. I used to like just doing a lot of like Photoshop on my pictures, but now I would much rather just get it right in camera and maybe make a few extra tweaks.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember this or not, but the first photo that you ever uploaded to the group, do you remember what it was?
I don't remember. I'm sure it was awful though.
No, it wasn't awful. It was your color selected Porsche, nice, beautiful red Porsche.
Yeah, I do remember that one now. Yeah.
And it's funny that obviously you're like, I spend a lot of time in Photoshop trying to get things right, and whenever you see like color selection, it can work out just fine. I think Jason in the group does the best job that I've ever seen with color selection. It's done always very tastefully, and it seems to make sense. But when you first get started, nothing ever makes sense, and you just
Right.
In fact, you know what I'm gonna do?
Don't you post it.
No.
Okay.
I have a color selected photo of mine that I made back in had to have been 2006. I'm gonna put in the show notes of this episode because it just makes no sense. It makes no sense,
Right.
but I thought that it was so cool at the time.
And I think that's good to show too, because like somebody like you who's been shooting for a long time and knows much more than most of us know, show your mistakes, man. We love seeing that because it makes you human. It's like, you know what? He did the same mistake and look where he is now. I can do this whole thing.
Oh man, I wish that I still had my old hard drive full of mistakes because it would just be packed to the brim. But I'm gonna have to go back and see if I can find more photos because I tell you what, I took a lot of bad photos,
I
photos.
think we all have.
So if 2009 was the year of trying to figure out how to get it right in camera, at the beginning of the year, on a scale from 1 to 10, where would you say that you were at with your knowledge of photography?
When I started, definitely like a 1 or 2, and probably now, 6 or 7 easily.
6 or 7.
Definitely need to know a lot more. But I feel much more confident as to where I am now.
Why? What happened in 2019 that gave you more confidence and knowledge in photography?
Honestly, I took the time to go back and listen to the very beginning of the podcast with you. I forgot the guy's name. He's from Canada.
Callum.
Callum. Yeah. I've never understood the exposure triangle until I heard you guys talking about, exposure and brightness and all that. I'm like, wait a minute. Now this all makes sense. It's not just a numbers thing. It actually makes sense to each other. So once I started learning that, I picked up my camera and started following along with what you guys were saying, and I just kind of improved that way. I feel like photography for me and probably a lot of other people is just you have to keep on doing it. If you do it once a week, you're never going to figure it out.
So just learning kind of like what the exposure triangle was and what it did. How did that specifically change your photography?
It gave me an understanding about the basics of photography. I think you said it best. No matter what camera you're using, what you're shooting, there's 3 things that every camera has, and as long as you can control those, cameras are nothing. It's easy, and that's kind of where I am now.
Yeah. So you would feel comfortable, even though you shoot on Canon, that if somebody handed you a Nikon camera or even like an old film camera, that you would be able to figure out how to expose an image.
Oh, absolutely.
That's awesome. That's a good feeling, isn't it?
It really is. And it's really thanks to you and everybody in the group. I know it's kind of sappy, but I don't think I'd know anything if it wasn't for everybody involved.
It's a pretty sweet group, isn't it?
It's a great group, yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely one of my favorite places to hang out on the internet.
Yeah.
And also funny because I just so happened to look at this today, which is why it's so fresh in my head. But in that Porsche photo, you specifically asked for some constructive criticism, and then you mentioned something about like not looking for a-holes, and then you said, "I'm looking at you, Reddit," and I laughed. I laughed at that because you just don't find much of that in the group. And if there is, we're quick to handle the situation and get them out.
Yeah, and I think I've told Kimberly Irish a few times because we talk probably 2 or 3 times a week. The photo community, man, it's so toxic. Everybody just wants to compete against everybody else, and I've never understood like why somebody in New York has to compete against somebody who's in Montana. You don't know each other. You're not taking each other's clients. Help each other out. Like photography is supposed to be fun at the very end of it.
It is supposed to be fun. That's a good question. What have you come up with? What do you think it is? Why do you think somebody in New York feels like they have to compete with somebody in Montana?
And I think it's just the New York attitude.
Come on. Why do you think somebody in Montana then has to feel like they have to argue with somebody in New York then?
Everybody has to be the best, man. The internet is full of just macho men and just people who want to be better than everybody else. No place for it. I get it. You want to be as good as you possibly can, but there's no reason to tear people down who you're never going to meet in real life.
Yeah.
let's just get together on this.
Yeah, exactly. So why do you think, now this is, I'm just curious. I didn't write down this question or anything. Why do you think the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group doesn't have any of that?
That's a good question. I think people all have one goal in mind. They just want to get better at shooting. Nobody's trying to take food off anybody's table. It's just somebody sees a picture and say, "Oh, it's great. How did you do that? What kind of editing did you use? What technique did you use in camera?" And I think it helps that people always want to, talk about that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's fun stuff to talk about.
It really is.
Technicals and it's so weird exactly. with all with other forms of art, you have. It's funny. I was telling Charlie this the other day. I forget where we were going, but he said "Oh, look, what was it? This is going to be a horrible story now." But basically, he looked at a sign. Maybe it was for a restaurant or something, and he's like, "Look, that is art." And I said, "Yeah, I guess you could kind of consider everything that you look at as a form of art. But when it comes to photography, there really is a lot of technicals involved. You know what I mean?"
Oh yeah.
And part of me feels as if that could be part of the superiority complex. Well, I understand, this equation or what these numbers mean, and if you don't, then you're not authentic. I guess. Does that make sense? Could that be something?
Oh yeah, no, I can definitely see that. Yeah, I can definitely see that for sure.
That's weird. Photography's weird. Photography's so weird. We should just stop.
We should. Let's just quit. Go live under the sea like the Simpsons.
Yeah, exactly. So you said at the beginning of 2019, you would say that your knowledge of photography was around a 1 or 2. And what did you say it is now that we're at the end of 2019?
About a 6 or 7.
6 or 7. Okay.
Yeah.
So what would you say is one piece of advice that you would give to anybody who's listening who wants to take their skills from a 1 or 2 to a 6 or 7?
Very simply, do not give up. I think it's so important, like I said, just to keep on shooting. If you take a week off or you take a month off and you don't think about it and you forget about things, it's so hard to catch back up. You really just got to keep on working at it, and you're gonna get discouraged. You're gonna take days where you shoot 1,000 photos and you hate 950 of them. It is what it is, man. Just keep on working at it. Understand what you did wrong and just improve on it for the next time.
Mm-hmm. How do you improve on what you did wrong? How do you know what you did wrong?
Well, I did a shoot a couple of months ago, and we went to this really dark park, and I was thinking, okay, if I just boost my my aperture and I boost my ISO to look better, it looked terrible. And I realized that, and I went back to that same park. I was like, okay, what do I need to do? How do I get this better? And I just learned, it's like, okay, I don't need to have such a fast shutter speed in this one. I don't need to have my ISO cranked up to 40,000. Let's just dial it back a little bit and figure out what's happening.
Yeah. So just being self-aware enough to actually and take the time to critique your photos. It sounds like.
Exactly, because if you can't critique yourself, then nobody else can. You have to be your biggest critic.
I'm gonna get that tattooed on my chest. I feel like that is a fantastic quote.
I'm going to get a tattoo on Tuesday, so if you want to come by, you let me know.
Jim, dude, I really appreciate you just kind of sharing where you're at, and I'm really excited to see where you're going, and I'm sure that the listeners are as well. Why don't you share with everybody listening where they can find you and keep up with you online?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Hang on. Instagram, JR Sinicki Photo. I have to look that up because I never type it in. It's just on my phone. So
I know, right? It's like my phone number. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, hit me up on Instagram, JR Sinicki Photo. I've got nothing else to do. If I'm not at work and my kid's sleeping, I'm like, let's talk, man. I'm down to talk, whatever. I'm pretty easygoing. So yeah.
I got nothing else to do. That's the tattoo that you're gonna get.
Exactly.
Hilarious. Well, Jim, again, man, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything, and I'll chat with you soon.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate it.
You know what I love about chatting with you all? It's the excitement. It is the optimism. It's the wonder of it all. Photography is still new, and I can hear that in the way y'all talk about photography and getting the perfect photo. It's infectious. So thank you all for sharing that with me. And thank you to Jim Kimberly and Saul, for sharing what you have learned in 2019 with all the listeners. 2019 was a big year for me as well. I absolutely focused on myself. I started shooting and developing film. It's always been one of those things that I just assumed was too difficult, as I never did it in high school or anything like that. But a simple YouTube search proved that to be, completely false. It's very easy to do. I even bought a medium format film camera, again, just to try something new. There's something about getting those tangible photos back that is just infectious, as I said earlier. There's something about it. There's more life to it. I heard a quote recently about the difference between film and digital photography from Chris Orwig, who I interviewed last week on the podcast. He said, when shooting digital, I look for the imperfections. But when shooting film, I embrace them. And that is so true. That is so true. How many times are we comparing megapixels to megapixels, and we go in, we zoom in 1-to-1 in pixel peep to find the imperfections, find where the camera is lacking. And you never do that with film. When you shoot film and you get the photos developed and a photo didn't turn out how you wanted, very rarely are you disappointed. You usually have the same reaction. It's like, oh wow, that's interesting, and that's it. But with digital, you typically say like, oh, if I would have just moved a bit to the left, or I wish that I would have seen that and I could block it out. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is, but it exists, and it's a very, powerful mindset shift. So that's 2019. That was my 2019. That's definitely where I focus on myself the most, is with film photography. But quickly, let's talk about how you will grow in 2020. So recently I sent out a survey to learn more about you, the listeners, and more than 80% of you said that you want to make money with your camera in some capacity. So whether that's a side hustle or full time. So in 2020, how you're going to grow as a photographer is that you are going to start making money with your camera. Now, I know that this sounds easier said than done, but that is why I want to personally help you by showing you how to set realistic and achievable business and photography goals in 2020. Now, you all know that the premium membership of the podcast is focused more on the business side of photography, so I'm going to host a Facebook Live training all about 2020 photography business goal setting in the premium members Facebook group. But if you're not a premium member, I have a special offer just for you. I'm going to offer the first month of the premium membership for free. So if you sign up to become a premium member by December 18th, I will refund your money. It's that easy. You're going to get the entire month for free. You're going to get access to more than a year's worth of premium interviews that are packed with business growth ideas from proven photographers. You'll also get access to the premium Facebook group, where we will have this 2020 photography business goal setting workshop on December 19th. And you get that all for free for the month of December if you become a premium member by December 18th. So how it will work is you go to sign up. You do have to, pay for that first month. You have to enter in the, your details. But once you do, within 24 hours, I'm going to refund you your payment. So it's free. Now, there is a link to the premium membership in the show notes, where you can also see my selective color photo that I was talking to Saul about. Or you can head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click that premium membership button at the top. So join today. And just a side note, if you are here to learn photography and you're not ready for the business side of photography, then the free podcast, the free Facebook group is going to do amazing things for you. And I don't hold back on any of the information that I give. But if you want to make money with your camera, then the premium membership is where you need to be. So that is it for today. But quickly, I just wanted to tell you all how much I just truly appreciate you, because without you, I wouldn't be able to do this podcast. So I truly owe so much to you, the listeners. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. So again, that is it. Until next week, I want you to get out. I want you to keep shooting. I want you to stay safe. And most importantly, I want you to focus on yourself. That's it. I love you all.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. And continue the conversation with Raymond and other listeners of the podcast by joining the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today. Thank you. We'll see you again next week.